Panda.
There we
Listen,
got it.
I got it. I'm not an old man. It just took an extra 5, 6 minutes to do it.
Mm-mm.
Oh my goodness. Okay, we're starting it over. Panda, how are you? Are you ready to talk
I'm
about
doing.
talk
I
some
am.
shit? Talk about some bullshit.
I am. But before that, I'd like to play a little theme music.
Go ahead.
Okay. Here we go. We're gonna play some theme music, you guys, to get us in the mood. All right. Just give me 1 second. 1 second. All right. Here we go. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and my crack. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and my crack. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and my crack. My neck, my back, lick my pussy and where's your I like to say that it is 3:58 Eastern Standard Time, and the tour is still a white alt-right man. Welcome to the live, everybody.
What other great introduction we have to that? Panda, thank you for being here. Now that I figured out the technology, we have the technology and I know how to use the technology ostensibly, and I won't have to rely on anybody ever again. And as my YT answers is maintained, I must now G-side anybody that's ever used this technology now. So if anybody learned how to do this, you're now a target on the hit list of the CIA, allegedly. For legal purposes, this is a joke. How are you doing, Panda? Are you ready? Excited? Are you ready to figure out the history and the conspiracy of Iran-Contra and some sea rocks and
I
everything
mean,
else?
I have it figured out. I'm ready and excited to share this with the non-believers and teach people how to critically think.
Well, we'll see if.
And,
Yeah, no.
you
Listen, we can hope. One can hope. This is meant to be fun. We'll see if people actually learn something. There's always something that we can learn. Panda, since you are my co-host, you are also. This is a Platonian. It's a Plato dialogue right now. So what is for Panda? How would you define history and conspiracy?
Well, I think with history, right? For me, the main thing with history is that we can go to several primary sources and secondary sources and compare them and go over them over and over again, and they consistently are like stay the same, right? We can see the sequence of things, and it's not up for like debate. It's not opinion, right? And so I think that's really important. I think conspiracy theories is mostly based on emotion. So I just want to use an example. The main conspiracy theory that's going around right now is, have you heard the conspiracy theory about the, can we say Mossad on here?
Do it. I don't care. I don't
Okay.
care. They'll find. They know. They'll find me eventually. It's okay.
So they there's this theory going around that Mossad was the unaliver of CK because he was getting out of line with his Zionist rhetoric. Like he was starting to shift, I guess, left on that. I don't see any evidence of that because just weeks ago he was denying that Palestinian children were starving. So and I actually see leading Palestinian creators on holding lives about this. And conspiracy theories are based and it's listen, it's not like I don't understand the psychology behind believing that, especially if you're Palestinian, right? Because it's very much like Black Americans. We see white people and we're just automatically like, hey. And I think when you're talking about Palestinians or anyone who comes from a Middle Eastern background, and how much America and Israel have worked together to just fuck up that whole region. And our involvement in the Iraq War and the lies that we have told, and how we've just put in leaders that we want into that area and that region. We don't have a good track record, right? Mossad does not have a good track record. So it's not like I don't understand the psychology behind, hey, this had to be Mossad. The issue I have with this conspiracy theory is that when we throw emotion into things that will, because this will become history, right? This event, and we don't have like facts behind it. And we're also discounting the very important part of this event is that it was alt-right on alt-right crime. What you do is you dismiss specifically Black Americans and how alt-right and white nationalism actively affects Black Americans and their own and our own act of genocide that we're experiencing, right? And so this is where conspiracy theories are dangerous, where it's, I understand that you're hesitant and this is the way that you feel, but you're also dismissing the history of this country. And that's the important part with conspiracy theories. I think like history is dismissed, behavior patterns are dismissed, and it's replaced with emotions. And the thought process is mostly based off of emotions. And then what ends up happening is inadvertently you put another group at risk with these conspiracy theories. And so inadvertently, this conspiracy theory about Mossad unaliving CK is throwing off the fact that we have a huge white nationalist problem, an alt-right issue in America. And ultimately, the victims of that will be Black Americans and then brown and indigenous people. And we have a prime example of that, right? Within hours of the situation, HBCUs were on lockdown and we had nothing to do with this. And we're still dealing with the increased anti-Black rhetoric that's online. Like they're not directing this towards white tea leftists or liberals. And it's not even white tea leftists or liberals. And then now we're seeing how it's affecting trans people. So by having this conspiracy theory, you're also dismissing another group, which is the trans community, because they've also been brought into this whole spiel. So, you know, I have a friend, she's Lebanese, and she lives in Dubai, and rightfully so, she's experienced a lot of trauma as far as issues with Israel. When she was younger, they had to deal with a lot of bombings and being in buildings and dealing with that, and then the issues that have been going on. So it's not like I don't understand her hesitancy when it comes to the Israeli government and Zionism. And I've had to have these conversations with her, and I don't think she's yet ready to accept it because she's in her emotions. She is determined that this man that was caught is not the man that did it, and it's a Mossad agent. And I keep trying to tell her, I understand your psychology behind that, but what you're doing is you're dismissing that alt-right is an issue in this country, and that's going to put Black Americans in danger, because then comes there's not racism, there's no issue, neo-Nazism is not a thing here. So that's how I see conspiracy theory versus history. I don't think history is a danger to people. Conspiracy theories can be, especially to marginalized groups. So to me, that's the clear difference between the two.
I think that's a good way to start out with emotion. I think the way I always describe it is that conspiratorian is the term I use. They look at problems in the same way historians do, but from the opposite end. A conspiracy theorist has already come up with the answer. It's Mossad, obviously. They've already come to the conclusion before because of everything else they did. It obviously has to be Israel doing this, and then we work backwards to find evidence for that. It's it's falsifiability, because history is a social science. Conspiracy theory is pseudoscience. Conspiracy theories don't need falsifiability. If it's wrong, you're just like, well, obviously the conspiracy would prove that this is wrong. The conspiracy adapts to being wrong. But a history, if it's wrong, then we don't use it anymore. We move on from it as well. And also, conspiracy theories don't usually talk to each other. They overlap, but they never actually interact. In history, you have to talk to other historians. You have to build upon other evidence. And you also have to read your sources from the perspective of, I might be wrong. Because we both use primary sources, but conspiracy theorists rarely use secondary sources. They rarely rely on experts or historians. They only rely on them so much as it proves their point. So if you look at someone who says, well, the jet fuel doesn't melt steel beams thing, that whole thing. It's like, well, it doesn't have to in order to cause a structure to collapse. Like certain things can be true or factually correct, but when you connect them, does that actually make a whole thing?
So you agree with me? We should attack that subject at some point.
Yes, we'll do 9/11 eventually. We'll do 9/11. We'll do Kennedy. We'll do it eventually. Listen,
it's only fair. It's only fair.
That's fair. Okay, listen. We'll listen. Everyone has to do it as well. Panda, I wanted to start off with I feel like Maxine Waters. I don't know if you want to read her foreword to Dark
Yeah,
Alliance.
yeah.
As a black woman, I would read her words, but I think you're more qualified to read Maxine Waters' words than a white man.
Let's do it. And for those of you who don't know why we're bringing up Maxine Waters, is because, first of all, Dan and I have not said whether or not we think that, I mean, Iran-Contra definitely happened. What we're tying into this scenario is Barry Seals and Freeway Ricky Ross into this whole scenario.
Gary
And
Webb, everything else that
yes.
goes on. I'm going to add more history to it about what's going on, and Panda's going to help narrate it.
And so, what we're bringing into this too is also the hypothesis that the Iran Contra deal was the segue to the government purposely funneling metric tons of sugar booger into black communities to pay for this, and in essence have and has always been the main supplier, plug, and drug dealer. And so, and especially now that we're dealing with this immigration issue and trying to label brown immigrants from the South coming through the southern border as the people who are funneling things like fentanyl and everything, when we and my hypothesis is that the plug has always been the white man in the American government. And so that is where the conspiracy theory is. And so we're going to present you guys the fact, and then after that we'll allow some people to come up, say, have any questions, and then say if they believe in my hypothesis. I haven't heard what Dan's hypothesis is. I have a feeling he agrees with me. And then kind of go yay or nay, is a conspiracy theory or not. Yeah. So see,
Democracy, consensus. We're doing academic consensus in real time. Is it true or not? Do we all agree? All hands. Okay, it's true. We've accepted the fact. This is how we met. This is how the Bible was made. This is how we figure everything. Who raised their hands the most? That's as well. Yeah. So I'll let. So everyone who's listening, and we got 10 people in right now. I know we had some mutuals earlier. If you come back, I got to restart it to do the co-host because I have to figure it out. Panda, I did send you the background, so you could put that as a green screen if you want to.
Okay.
What Panda is going to read is the foreword to the book Dark Alliance. Dark Alliance is the one that takes Iran-Contra and connects it to the Iraq epidemic. Ironically enough,
was this written before or after the congressional hearing on
after.
this?
So Kerry does it in 89. Webb writes it in 96 and 98. So this is.
And when did Webb pass away?
2004 from self-annihilation.
Part of the conspiracy theory that's going to be part of our. Do you think he unalived himself or not?
From what I've read, well, like I don't want to bury the lead too much. I think it is possible he did do it because he was in a dark place. I don't think he was wrong though. I think there's a thing where I think he's a lot more right than he is wrong.
So this is when I read the details of it in his history, my synopsis is that he didn't, because I think this whole situation made his mental health issues worse. So my synopsis is kind of he and the government did it. I think that it was a secondary effect to the him going through this and literally almost like literally losing his career and being labeled just a kook job journalist.
And we'll get into that. And we'll get into that.
Right. And so I think that two things can be true about it. While I think he physically was the one that did it, I think that the government and the web of lies that were built by this, and him calling it out and blowing the whistle and no one believing him, and then using this to make him the person non grata, contributed to that. And then him unaliving himself was secondary to that. So I think he pulled the trigger, and I think the government held the gun. So
I don't disagree. Maxine Waters, forward to Dark Alliance. Go ahead, Panda.
Okay. So the night that I read the Dark Alliance series, I was so alarmed that I literally sat straight up in bed, poring over every word. I reflected on the many meetings I attended throughout South Central Los Angeles during the 1980s, when I constantly asked, where are all the drugs coming from? I asked myself that night whether it was possible for such a vast amount of drugs to be smuggled into any district under the noses of the community leaders, police, sheriff's departments, FBI, DEA, and other law enforcement agencies. I decided to investigate the allegations. I met with Ricky Ross, Alan Fenster, Mike Rupert, Salerno Castillo, Jerry Guzetta, and visited the LA Sheriff's Department. My investigation took me to Nicaragua, where I interviewed Enrique Miranda Jame in prison, and I met with the head of the Sandinista intelligence, Tomas Borga. I had the opportunity to question Contra leaders Adolfo Calero and Eden Pastora. Sorry, you guys, I'm totally messing up your Spanish last names, and I apologize in advance. And a Senate investigative hearing, which was meant to be perfunctory until I arrived to ask questions based on the vast knowledge I had gathered in my investigation. I forced Calero to admit he had a relationship with the CIA through the United States Embassy, where he directed USAID funds to community groups and organizations. Keep that in mind, you guys. USAID funds. The time I spent investigating the allegations of the Dark Alliance series led me to the undeniable conclusion that the CIA, DEA, DIA, and FBI knew about the drug trafficking in South Central Los Angeles. They were either part of the trafficking or turned a blind eye to it in an effort to fund the Contra War. I am convinced that drug money played an important role in the Contra War and that drug money was used by both sides. The saddest part of these revelations and the wrecked lives and lost possibilities of so many people who got caught up in selling drugs ended up addicted, dead, or walking zombies from drugs. It may take time, but I am convinced that history is going to record that Gary Webb wrote the truth. The establishment refused to give Gary Webb the credit that he deserved. They teamed up in an effort to destroy the story and very nearly succeeded. There are a few of us who congratulate Gary for his honesty and courage. We will not let this story end until the naysayers and opponents are forced to apologize for their reckless and irresponsible attacks on Gary Webb. The editors of the San Jose Mercury News did not have the strength to withstand the attacks, so they abandoned Gary Webb, despite their knowledge that Gary was working on further documentation to substantiate the allegations of the series. The book completely and absolutely confirms Gary Webb's devastating series. The book is the final chapter on this sordid tale and brings to light one of the worst official abuses in our nation's history. We all owe Gary Webb a debt of gratitude for his brave work. I would like to add, I think a name she forgot to mention, and I think it's a very important name, is Barry Seals. And I think the reason why Barry Seals was not in that is because he was an official CIA informant, and when I pull up the CIA documents, he's listed as an agent.
We'll bring in Barry Seals later. So for those of you who didn't, who just joined in, was wondering what Panda was reading, she was reading Maxine Waters' foreword to the book Dark Alliance, which is based on a web series written by the investigative journalist Gary Webb. Gary Webb was the lead writer for the Los Angeles Mercury News. He was investigating the San Jose, sorry, not saying Los Angeles. Same cities, same. They're all the same, and California's all the same.
Californians will tell you there's a difference between north and south.
I don't know the difference. Like, I'm from the East Coast. I don't mess with the West Coast people. Gary Webb launched this series where he was looking into the effects of Iran-contra and the C-Rock epidemic as it was ending in the mid-90s, and the Bill Clinton administration was passing a new crime bill. He goes back and he's looking at the documents for it by the CIA that were being released. He looks back at the Kerry Commission, which investigated this in '89, which received no news coverage, and he essentially goes back and looks back over everything that happens. And then he starts taking together these local social histories that people were talking about, like Maxine Waters mentioned, and he starts putting together this timeline story. Now, a lot of what Gary Webb writes about and talks about is not what gets reported about what he says. He's very deliberate in the fact that he is like, look, there are these very specific individuals that are involved here, and it shows that there is some acceptance of the smug trafficking that's going to be happening between Colombia, Nicaragua, and the United States. And now what we'll get into later on when we talk about Webb is that he will self-eliminate December 10th, 2004. This is after he had lost his job as a news reporter. He was ridiculed. He was chased. He wrote this book in '98, and he would work as an investigative reporter for the legislature of California for many years as a freelancer. But he was in rough financial situation, and he is sadly was very young. He was 49 years old when he self-eliminated. Now there is speculation about how much was of his own accord and who was punished. And I know we talked about that earlier, and we will speak on that when we get there. But that is essentially in a nutshell we're going to start off with. But Panda, before we go there, I want to rewind a bit to Schmug policy before the 80s. So,
Yeah.
what do you know about Schmug policy before Reagan?
Okay, so what I do know is I think it was 1911 when cocaine was officially kind of I'm not going to say outlawed because it was not outlawed as long as it was written by a prescription was written by a doctor. So when we look at the history of cocaine in America, it was in a lot of over the counter drugs in the well into the early 20th century. So I think we didn't even have the FDA until 1906. So I think uh, it became a Schedule 5 drug, I think, in the 70s.
Yep. Yep.
So, and then the DEA wasn't even established until
73.
the early 70s,
73.
Right.
Yep.
So I think it's important for us to understand and understand these dates because I think they're important. I think it's really funny that the DEA gets established in 73. And I think that has a lot to do with Nixon. I think a lot of people think that this war on drugs started with Reagan. It didn't. It started with Nixon. So that's basically the rundown of cocaine. Basically, cocaine was used everywhere in the States in the early 20th century. And it was in almost every over-the-counter drug that you could find at like your mom and pop pharmacy. And then in 1911, the American government made it illegal unless prescribed by a doctor, which wouldn't have been hard at that time to get.
Absolutely. So, yeah, and just to keep going, so 1906, the FDA is formed by Theodore Roosevelt. Before then, there's really no federal law over schmug usage. It's mostly up to the states. Obviously, there's the reefer madness in the 30s, which is not really formal policy, but rather a public panic that creates social conditioning around it. The first time the United States purposely starts enforcing a drug policy was Prohibition. 1920 to 33. That's when they banned alcohol consumption in the United States. That is the first official kind of, you can call pre-war on schmugs. 1970, the Controlled Substances Act. So what you mentioned before, that's when the 5 categories of substance are mentioned. They bring in Mary J, Sugar Booger, they bring all that and they schedule them. Now, the thing is that they schedule all the schmugs that are used by the counterculture. And the DEA is going to be established in 73, which is right around after Nixon's reelection, but also around the same time that Watergate starts to blow up as well. I'm not saying that they're linked. And Vietnam. Well, Vietnam's ending.
I think it had a lot to do with curbing the hippies and the anti-war movement, which I think they were trying to label a lot of these people as hippies and drug users. And so this was their way of trying to crack down, I think, on protesters and specifically in colleges. And so that's kind of how I feel. But I don't like allegedly.
Yeah, I think okay. So so this is the thing. This is a good one about primary sources. So the 1970 Controlled Substance Act is interesting because it does not actually create criminal statutes in the same way that Reagan does. So when we talk about the war on schmugs in Nixon's time, it's more of a moral one. It's more of a recategorization, a redoing of language. So when they create those 5 controlled substances, it starts to limit access to certain schmugs that you couldn't have before. And it's like, well, you're a schmug user, which becomes a colloquialism for criminal, which becomes a colloquialism for black and brown much later on in urban. And this is mostly in the 80s, but that begins with Nixon. And you're right. It all targets, if you look at what gets categorized where, it's not based on medical science. It's based on who is politically more dangerous to Nixon. So if you look at the counterculture, like you mentioned, or what schmugs might be used by people that are on the left or progressive that wanted the Vietnam War to end, it is you if you think of it from that lens, you see exactly who's getting targeted a lot more. But we don't actually get the mechanics of the prison industrial complex yet, as we understand it today. And so
But I
that comes
think
into the three.
I think it's important though to understand that things are being put into place at this time and who the players are um, at this time. So while it may not have been structuralized completely, we have to also take into account that 1976 to 1977, George W. Bush Sr. is head of the CIA. So we have to look at who are the players I think from Nixon on into the 90s, and the players when we talk about CIA, when we talk about the creation of the DEA, who are those players in those back offices. And we'll get back to why George W. Bush being head of the CIA is so important later on when we talk about things like Manuel Noriega. That's why I wanted to add to that. Like, it's very important to note that George H.W. Bush was the head of the CIA from 1976 to 1977 during this time as well.
Absolutely. Now, Panda, I didn't include this in our pitch deck. I'm going to act like we're in private equity. I didn't put it in the pitch deck about the CIA, but let's talk about the CIA real quick. How much do you know about the CIA's history, like its administrative history?
So I'm not a CIA like buff. I'm gonna be honest. The only thing I know about CIA is through because one of my favorite authors is Tom Clancy. Like clear and present danger. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm gonna be honest. Like that's kind of, and I know a little bit from investigating this and looking into the CIA website into Barry Seals. I kind of gotten some background on it, but basically, for me, the CIA is just a bunch of white older American men that have the license to kind of just do whatever they want. And I feel like their perception, their reality of what they think America and foreign affairs is the reality of America. So that's what I get. But as far as administration, I'm not too big on that, other than my knowledge of George Bush's his role in the CIA from 76 to 77 and how this plays all into this.
Absolutely. I want to. So the reason I ask is because what department do you think the CIA is under?
So I would have said intelligence, but could it also be under defense?
It's now under what we consider Homeland Security, but that was created in 2004. It actually doesn't have an agency over it. It's a completely independent branch. It only has the president over it. Technically, the president puts in the head. It technically
Scandal was right.
Yeah, listen, that's a whole thing. So the CIA comes out of the OSS. The OSS was formed during Dub Dos as a way of coordinating the intelligence efforts between the Army and the Navy and the signal commanders. So they work with the State Department, the Treasury Department, the Navy, and the Army, which are the four big departments. They essentially come out as an ad hoc basis. So they are a completely new department. They're not under anyone. I thought they were under the State Department, but they're not. They are essentially invented out of whole cloth to solve this problem of coordinating these different departments. But it's under the presidency. So this is already a red flag to begin with. The CIA does not answer to anybody except for Congress in terms of budgetary concerns. So the the Intelligence Committee, so the Subcommittee on Intelligence. So they answer to Congress in terms of these subcommittees, but they have no agency in charge of them. It's just the president. The president nominates the director.
Checks and balances.
Again, the only check and balance is the president can fire the head and replace him, and they only have to answer to Congress when called before a subcommittee in terms of funding. But in terms of once they get that funding, they can do whatever they want with it. So they actually have, yeah.
So the CIA finds out that Russia did in fact interfere with the elections, allegedly. Let's just like hypothetical. And the only person they have to report it to is this funky orange man. And then it just goes out into outer space, never to be heard again.
Or if
Is
Congress,
that basically what you're telling me?
or if Congress petitions them, because they have to hold on to all their documents. The reason we know so much about Iran-Contra and all the schmug trading that the CIA gets involved in is because they have to keep their documents, and they do eventually declassify them. This is one thing about conspiracy theory is that we have all the evidence that they keep. Now you can say, well, what evidence are they destroying? If they do that, they're technically committing treason, and we have enough corresponding evidence to fill the gap, so even stuff was being destroyed. So they only have to do it to the president unless Congress petitions them for a hearing. Then they have to give that so they don't go to jail.
when we're running under a system where our checks and balances are failing and Congress is not doing its job, in essence, the CIA becomes a rogue department with $73.4 billion at the helm as a budget, which is scary, which
Yeah,
is really cool.
they're going to operate a lot like a independent. They're because they came out of an ad hoc institution. They're going to add very ad hoc. And I say this not as a defense against them of what's going to happen later, but it's does the CIA actions are they being directed by the presidency or are they operating of their own accord? And it's kind of a mix of both in many ways. There's a lot of gray matter about where does something go. There's no smoking gun document, but they know they act very much in line with foreign policy directives. Go ahead, Panda.
Well, according to Tom Clancy and Olivia Pope, they don't. They look at the president and they side eye and say, "Ain't nobody listening. Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis." Basically, is how the CEA responds to, you know what I'm saying, to the president. I mean, and I'm just saying that's just. I know we are a history podcast and we do like to deal in primary sources, but I'm just saying, Olivia Pope and Tom Clancy said that these people be running around all crazy and wild and willy nilly in the CIA,
The CIA has a lot of overreach
and
because
they
they
don't
deal
even
with.
listen to the president.
Yeah, no, they do have a lot. So this is the thing; they do have a lot of autonomy. Theoretically, their answers to the president, to the executive, because he is the chief executive of the department of the agency. But it is an independent agency. It's technically civilian, not military, so everyone is through the civilian side. But obviously, a lot of people that work for the CIA usually go into the military at some point. And they have very few checks and balances than you would want from this because it's not an official thing from like the State Department or from the DoD, now the DoW, because we're bringing back the Department of War because idiots, morons. But I just wanted to set that up, so I want to move on to Reagan.
And just
So
one more thing before we get off the CIA. Don't you find it weird that when CIA agents pass away in the field that we don't get to know who their names are?
I mean, to be fair, they don't want their families to go into hiding. I mean, because they are technically like spies and everything else, so you don't want that blowback. But they are also covering their ass. It's a mix of both. Protecting the
Okay.
families and covering their ass. I'm not. I would be more surprised if they're like, yeah, look at this man. He was happily married with 5 kids. Here's his address. Go find him up. But I do think that's part of. But that's also because they're so clandestine and because their operations are so shady. I think this is also part of the problem with the intelligence community. Again, this is foreign intelligence. The CIA is supposed to be foreign. If they are involved in domestic things, they're technically breaking the law, and the FBI is supposed to step in and regulate them because the FBI is supposed to be the federal domestic investigative body, intelligence body, not the CIA. The CIA is supposed to only deal with foreign assets, as in other countries.
Which I think speaks to Maxine Waters claiming that there's no way that local and especially FBI and the DEA didn't know this, because I could understand if this had just stayed in Nicaragua, right, or in Iran, but it didn't. It crossed into the border of America in the form of drug dealing, in mass amounts. And so I think that goes to your point, right, where they're foreign, and then when we get to American land, like, how did the FBI not know that the CIA was buying airports for Barry Seals in Arkansas? Like, and why were they buying airports in America if they're a foreign agency and dealing with foreign affairs for an American so-called CIA agent? So
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think anything and it's the CIA internal documents that we have show that this was relayed to local agents. How far up the chain it got is another question. But at least a local level, at the lowest level of ground operations, there was this communication of this is ours, this is our operation, you don't have jurisdiction. Get out of here. I want to move on to the war on schmugs under Reagan real quick, and then we'll get into the actual quote unquote Sea Rock epidemic and how it really began. But the reason why is because the war on schmugs, as we understand it, really gets underway under Reagan. This is the Comprehensive Crime Control Act of 1984. There's Just So You Know campaign under Nancy Reagan. This is when you have the mandatory minimum sentencing, the 100-to-1 ratio, and the Drug Abuse Act of 1988 when the federal unalignment penalty is reinstated. Like I said, it's just very short things as well, but this is when the war on schmugs really begins under Reagan. Now, I want you to remember those dates, 1986, 1988, and 1984, because they're going to be important as we kind of move through this campaign. Now, Panda, I don't know how much you know about these acts or the Reagan administration in general. I don't want to speak for you. If anybody is watching that has experiences, I would love to hear from you later on about living during this time period. Did you have any personal experience with or familiar experience that you can recall about the Reagan administration and these acts and the kind of discourse of the time?
Um, I wasn't born yet.
I don't say you were. I'm just saying your family, anybody in the family, you know somebody, it's got a story.
No, my parents weren't in even in America yet in the 80s. But I do remember as a kid, because I think we have, if you're born from 80 on to probably in the mid 90s, you were part of the Just Say No campaign. And it was constantly pushed on you. And then I think also movies, like, the movies that we watched, it was always made out to be a black issue. And come to find out that while they were pushing it into communities, it was also being widely used by Caucasians in both rock and powder form. And in fact, it was being widely used by Caucasians in powder form. It's just that as Hunter Biden told us, they changed the sentencing on it because they were targeting black communities. So I just feel, and it's not so much feel, I mean, the evidence shows us that this was kind of killing two birds with one stone. Um, and I think this also ties into the 13th Amendment. Let's push drugs into a community. And then once this community has converted it into a rock form, and we have now created this fallacy that only black people use it in rock form, now we can change in the sentencing to affect poor, underserved black communities, and stock our prisons with them and start the private prison system and get free labor. So I think it's just such a heinous thing that I just don't think we talk about enough. And then when we try to talk about it, we get, MAGA, nuh-uh. So I think that's why we're running this live, because it's very much
Well, we're going to start with the conspiracy theory that is not really that much of a conspiracy theory. The only big question, and again, I'm not going to bury the lead too much, is how ingrained into the institutions is it? Is this a byproduct of contingency, or is this all intentional? And it's kind of a mix of a lot of different motivations. I want to start with some cocoa powder. We're going to talk about cocoa powder for a bit. Now, cocoa powder, where most of the cocoa powder that always exists comes from Colombia. It always comes from Colombia. During the 80s and the 70s, it was going from Colombia into the Bahamas into Miami. Miami is where you get all the cocoa powder. If you wanted cocoa powder, you had to go to Miami. But it was mostly a middle class to upper class drug because cocoa powder is really expensive. And if you're just a random person that's like, well, I can't really afford this. And it's mostly in the rich white tea communities. Even when Sea Rock gets started, because Sea Rock is not as uncommon as we think. It doesn't just randomly snap out of black and brown communities. There had been a process to making Sea Rock before, through the late 70s into the early 80s. But what happens is that during the 80s, the price of cocoa starts to go down. Now, again, this is this is early 1980, beginning of 1981. We'll get into why the 80 and 81 are a big deal. And this is when we start seeing Sea Rock start to pop up in 81. And also in 81 is when the CIA knows that the Contras are smuggling cocoa powder into the United States. So this is all happening at the same time. So we have the CIA, and we're going to look at this when we get later on to the Contras. But at this time period in the 80s, it's mostly come from Colombia. It's mostly a middle class drug. If you're a wealthy black and brown person, you are using this. But most police officers have never seen cocoa before. They don't know what it is. They don't know what it looks like. A lot like Fenty. They don't know what Fenty is. And even today, I don't even think they know what Fenty is because they're selling it. They're just bringing it and selling it. The police. 50 loves to sell some HO, if you know what I mean. Panda. I can't think of a good mnemonic there for Fenty or any derivative of opiates. But this is the setting the stage of the epidemic. I put the Sea Rock epidemic in quotations because a lot of it is media driven. There is a smug issue, but it's not as big as people believe. what's going to happen in the mid 80s from 85, 86, and 87, when we talk about Ricky Ross and everyone, is that the media massively focuses on the inner cities and black and brown populations. But YT people are using it just as much, if not more, like C-Rocks and cocoa powder as well. So I've set it up. What do you what do you have to what would you like to add to that?
So I do want to add to that, when we're talking about the propaganda of the drug use, that there was notable doctors that were noticing high levels of cocaine and like white individuals, white Americans. And so when the first hearings or government propaganda was coming out about that this was a black inner city issue, um, and they were focusing on rock form, we had significant doctors that were sounding the alarm and saying, no, this isn't a black epidemic. This is an actual American, like, this is an epidemic that's happening across the country. And we're concerned. And if we don't get a hold of this, this is going to have significant um, consequences nationwide, and health consequences. And they kept sounding the alarm and weren't listened to. So there were doctors that were coming out and saying, hey, cocaine and sniffing form is just as bad, if not worse. And we're concerned. We're seeing it in like in blood samples of white Americans in suburbia nationwide, and this is an epidemic. This is not a black issue, and they were completely ignored.
Absolutely, absolutely. The reason why I want to set this up, though, the reason why I'm trying to set this up is because is that there's already a racial component to this before then, and a class as well, because it's America. You can't talk about American history, regardless of conspiracy or anything else, without talking about race or class. You have to do the intersection between those two things. And I just want to set that up early on because when we get into this about what's happening, we're going to focus very heavily on the impact on black and brown communities, but there is a lot of white people doing it as well. Not to center them as victims, but rather to say that the reason why it goes into black neighborhoods is because the dealers like Ricky Ross were like, I'm not going into an area where I'm not safe. Like they're going to places where they are welcome and in community with, which is not YT people. YT people are still getting it because they still go out into these neighborhoods and buy it. But the reason it goes from place to place in the way it does is because of the racial and class dynamic of the United States as
And
well.
also, that plays into part with some of the doctors not being believed, because before the white American doctors, Dr. Niels Noya, who was a Nicaraguan psychiatrist, was sounding the alarm because he was noticing psychosis in Lima residents who were using the drug, and he was sounding the alarm up north in America and saying, "Hey, something's going on in Ecuador, Colombia, and Peru, and people we're seeing like psychosis, literal psychosis being driven by cocaine use, this powder that people are sticking up their nose." And the government even got American white doctors to say that sniffing it up your nose, it was harder to get high because the membranes were in the nose, which is crazy.
Because
Like,
we
now
know now
looking
that's not
back,
true.
like, which is crazy, right? Because what we know about anatomy is, you know what I'm saying? So
It goes through the
that
blood-brain
was
barrier. It goes through the blood-brain
right.
barrier.
And a funny thing is that it wasn't black Americans who came up with it in rock form, because white Americans were putting it into a paste form and putting it into their cigarettes beforehand, and then
Mhm.
that led to because we know drug dealers are businessmen. And I'm just going to lay it out there. I mean, let's be honest. I feel like they're no different than a CEO of BlackRock or a CEO of United Healthcare who's out here endangering people every day. These people are out here to make money, and they're inventive, right? Because a lot of their backgrounds are in an area where I have to be forward thinking to make money because my life depends on this. Me feeding my family and my children depends on this. So when you're seeing white people make it into paste form, and
Mm.
seeing how they react for it, and seeing that, okay, wait, I can get more from the product if I produce it this way, then of course the businessman is going to be inventive and be, okay, maybe we can do this and turn it into this. So again, rock form was not a form that was created out of the blue by black dealers in, in East LA. It was by white suburban people putting it in paste form and smoking it in their cigarettes.
Yep, and another thing to remember is that the reason why it was a way of also creating new demand, because you don't need that much cocoa powder to make some sea rocks. You only need a very small amount, and you can make a lot with it. And this is where we start seeing that ballooning effort. So there's a limited supply, but what limited supply exists, they invent a new set of supply. So like capitalism, you take a component, you recycle, you chop it up, and you reproduce it for another people. You create more demand.
Capitalism at its best, right? But when
Absolutely.
capitalism is done by black entrepreneurs in East LA, suddenly it's a problem. But McKesson selling 10 times the amount of opioids in a small mom and pop pharmacy, enough to cover everybody in the town times 10, that form of capitalism is 100% okay. Now, I'm not saying that drug dealers are great and wonderful. What I'm
I'll
saying
say it,
is that
Panda. I'll say it, Panda. They're to the true entrepreneurs. They start with nothing. They
they
pull
are
themselves
the
by the
real
bootstraps.
capitalists.
They do everything in
Right.
cash. Like they know what they're doing. They know what they're
They
doing.
know what they're doing. They're inventive. They're smart. And if you, for all of you MAGA people who scream capitalism, 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 drug dealers, you should have an appreciation for it, because that is what it is. It's capitalism, right? You would never tell someone, um, hey, don't go buy that chainsaw at Home Depot because it could be dangerous. And then when they hurt themselves with the chainsaw, you don't go to Home Depot and get mad at the cash guy that cashed them out and sold them the chainsaw. And I just feel like we've demonized drug dealers, and without going to the functionality of it, and the process of why these people become drug dealers. And it's because of capitalism. Capitalism has created it. This is what you guys want. And so you've got it. You've got capitalism in the form of sugar booger.
Absolutely, absolutely. We're 48 minutes in, so you want to do a quick mod announcement? I know we got like 12 people in, but we'll still like do a quick mod
Yeah.
announcement thing.
So I do want to do a plug to remind you guys that we have two beautiful Black women, Jessica Simone and Janae, who run Black initiatives. One is We Are What's Left, which is Jessica Simone's. If Jessica, if you're in here, if you could make a comment in the comment section so people can follow your We Are What's Left movement. And then we also have the beautiful Jade, who is running an initiative called New Roots. And I love this initiative. This initiative is trying to raise $250,000 so she can, and with that, right, because with $10,000, she can move a family of 4 out of the country. So she could help, 250 families. And so Black women and children and Black femme presenting to migrate to safer countries, because as we know, this is not a safe place for Black women and children or femme presenting Black individuals in the trans community. And 100 families, 100 families. And so in the next 45 days, we are trying to raise $7,500. There are 129 of you in here. If you guys go to the link in my bio or in Dan's bio and you donate $10, we can get $1,230 already to that. She's having a fundraiser on Friday from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So add her and join her live on Friday. I see a lot of you in lives where MAGA people are up there being racist as all so you can join a Black woman's live and be supportive. That's today at 5 p.m. And Jessica goes live Monday through Fridays, I think 6 p.m. to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. And Janae always is live Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. So after we're done with this live, Dan and I, we want you guys to go over to Janae's live. And last but not least, we have Bernard Taylor for Congress. That's his @name on TikTok. He's running for the 21st district in Florida, a Black man, firefighter, vet. His focus is on helping schools that have been defunded, affordable housing, and bringing affordable healthcare to his community. So that's my plug. Like, share, And if you would like to send Dan and I coins, that's great. If that's the only way that you can do it. But if you can instead go to the links in our bio and donate to We Are What's Left and New Roots, that would be amazing.
And save your coins for them too. Like if you want to
Yes.
send a few coins to us, like that's fine. But like we're not going to
Just
ask for
save the
gifts.
coin for the fundraiser tonight.
Exactly.
This is not a gift live.
This
So.
no, this is not a gift live. If you're sending anything, just do the heart me's because that's really the best thing that TikTok loves. Like sending massive gifts. Like I'm not Dean. I'm not trying to make tens of thousands of dollars off the work and racism of against black and brown people. I'm not that devoid of soul. Like I'm not that devoid.
Dan in 4:47 Eastern Standard Time, and Dean and Parker are still racist right wingers disguising themselves as virtue signaling leftists. Now we can get back to the program at hand.
Yes, we can. Well, like I said, we have about 12 minutes left. So what we'll do is that we'll do a little bit of the history of this, and then what we'll do is that we'll make a part 2. We'll come back to it because I don't want to bleed over into Janae's live. I want us to be able to flood over there.
No, I don't want to either.
Yeah, so we'll cut it off about 5 p.m. So I know I got 10 people watching here right now.
Why don't we stop here? Because we gave a lot of information. Why don't we take a couple of guests if they have any questions?
Okay, we can do that. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah,
if you want to request up. Yeah, we'll do that. I like that.
So if you guys want to request up, we can take some questions, or you can give us some feedback of what you've learned so far. If you have any questions of what you learned so far, if you want some resources that you can look at until we host the next one and go into part 2. And tell us where you stand so far on like where you're leaning so far, or what your hypothesis is, if you think this is a conspiracy theory or not. And then we can go back to you when we're done presenting all the parts and see if your mind has changed or if it stayed the same. So you guys, please request up. Do we have any people that are requesting up?
I think they're on the other one where I kind of messed it up, but it's all good. Let me see if I can find. There we go. I got request up for Q&A. And I'll put a countdown too, just so we have 12 minutes.
Yeah,
and we can yap too, Panda, because obviously there's a lot of things, so I can yap. So what we'll do in the next part is that we will look at CJ's requesting. I think I know CJ.
Yeah.
Is my CJ? All right, I'll let CJ up.
Well, we'll see.
Oh no, it'll disconnect you. It'll go to guest. It'll do the split screen. It'll go to this multi-guest panel since I'm hosting.
Really? We can't do.
I don't think
it'll drop me. So it'll drop me, and I'll just request to come on your live.
Yeah.
Do it that way.
Okay, then I'll just do that.
So let it drop me, and then I'll just come back. Yeah. Do that.
Yeah, we'll do that. I like that transition. All right. Let me let. Yep. Oh. There we go. All right, and we're still here. Yay, and CJ. CJ, give me 1 second. Yep, and Panda, I know I got you here. So like I said, we'll get comfortable with this as we go along. Hey, Panda, I got you. I don't know why CJ's not. It's not letting me do his piece of CJ up. But yeah, so we'll figure out how to do the Q&A switch. All right, cool. There we go. Cool. CJ, welcome.
How's it going?
Good. What's your question or answer or speculation?
I just I didn't have a question until because I've researched this myself, you know what I mean? And people still think this is a conspiracy theory. I don't know. I thought they released papers like years ago.
Yeah, so we'll get into that. So there is literally a whole committee on this. I think the problem is the fact that the Kerry Commission by John Kerry. Am I saying his name right, Panda? The 2004 Democrat. It was John Kerry.
Yeah.
It was his committee when he was a senator. It did not get a lot of news coverage in '89, and a lot of people. There's not a lot of news analysis on this in the late 80s, early 90s. You really only have the commission drops, and then you have Gary Webb do his thing. And because Gary Webb self-eliminates in 2004, it kind of gets lost because of the Iraq War. So it's one of these things where only black and brown people really talk about it, and YT folk and the larger American community are kind of like, yeah, very dismissive of it as well.
Yeah.
I think it's because the truth is very nuanced in this, and by that I mean everyone kind of knew this was going on, and they were kind of like, it's whatever. And that's kind of like, and I think that a lot of Americans today don't like the fact that the foreign intelligence service, the domestic if enforcement agencies and everybody else were just okay with people bringing in schmugs to do the Nicaraguan war. So I think that there's still a lot of like that psyche, because you have to remember in 91 we have the Iraq war, the first one, where people are like yay per America again, and then 9/11. So if you look at these kind of peaks of American patriotism, I think it's very difficult for people to accept it. I would say today there's a lot more, there's now this return of acceptance to this, but I think that's why. And it did not get a lot of attention. Your response, Panda?
She's muted, I think.
Okay, so my response is, and I think this is a good way to end this live, is to read a memorandum for record. So this is for the interview of Dewey Claridge by House Judiciary Committee it's a document OCA 88-1404, and it was dated May 3rd, 1988. Okay, and this is straight from the CIA website. So on 22nd of April, 1988, Jim Dahl and Hayden Gregory, staffers for the Subcommittee on Crime of the House Judiciary Committee, interviewed Dewey Claridge regarding his knowledge of drug trafficking by the Nicaraguan government or the Contras. The focus of the briefing concerned a drug enforcement agency DEA operation in June 1984 to photograph Nicaraguan government officials in Nicaragua loading cocaine onto a plane bound for the United States. The plane was piloted by a DEA informant, Barry Seals. Now, this is important because Barry Seals, when he piloted these airplanes, he would go back and forth with Nicaragua with the cameras on the plane. And eventually this plays into part of how Barry Seals was unalived, and we'll get into that in a second part. But he flew that to an airport that he bought and put in his name with CIA funds. And we'll go into that in the documents that prove that in another podcast. The plane was piloted by DEA informant Barry Seal, and the hidden camera was installed by the agency on the plane in Miami. And Barry Seals was recruited by the CIA. He was a commercial pilot before. During the briefing, Dewey recalled being asked by DEA to install a hidden camera on the plane piloted by Barry Seal. Dewey stated that it was his understanding that the photographs would be given to the DEA to use in a possible trial. I will show you guys those photographs, by the way. The agency's role in the entire operation was merely to support a law enforcement undertaking. Dewey recalls that one of the individuals photographed loading cocaine into the plane was Federico Vaughn, an aide to the Nicaraguan Interior Minister. Okay. Dewey recalls that not long after obtaining the photograph of Nicaraguan government officials loading cocaine into the plane, a briefing was arranged by DEA in North's office.
Yep.
And we actually,
I want to say that sentence again.
Go ahead.
Okay? I want to read that again. Dewey recalls that not long after obtaining the photographs of Nicaraguan government officials loading cocaine into the plane, a briefing was arranged by the DEA in North's office. Dewey was present at the briefing, but cannot recall why can't I just see this? Hold on, give me 1 second. Why does it cut off at 4 and doesn't go into 5? It cuts off at 4 and doesn't give me the rest of it. I'll try to get the rest of that for you. Mr. Gregory noted that a few weeks after the briefing in North's office, the picture was leaked to the Washington Times. Dewey stated that he did not know whether North or anyone on his staff leaked the pictures to the newspaper. Dewey did remember that the Paula Hawkins used the pictures in her re-election effort. Mr. Gregory also asked Dewey a series of questions dealing with allegations of Contra involvement with drug smuggling. Dewey responded that these allegations arose after he left the Latin American division, and therefore he was not in a position to comment on the allegations.
I want to read an entry from Oliver North's journal. This is dated July 12th, 1985. Oliver North is part of the National Security Council. He is this guy here in the graphic. And Panda, I did send you the graphic, so you can put it in your background if you want to. I will be making graphics for all of this. This is reparations. The YT man is giving back. This is reparation. We're doing free labor. Just kidding. It's a terrible joke. It's an absolute terrible joke to make this context. I will I will pay in the afterlife. I will pay in the afterlife for that, but I'm okay with paying the afterlife for that. I do want to read what Oliver North wrote on July 12th, 1985. This is at the peak of the Sea Rock epidemic, while he is claiming that no schmugs are using for weapons. Uh, uh, According to the notebook, Secord, who was one of Richard Secord, is part of the Air Force. He writes, he told North that, quote, 14 million to finance the arms in the warehouse came from schmugs. So Oliver North was told in 85 that they were using schmugs to buy weapons by July 12th, 1985. So they already knew. If they didn't know before, they knew now in 85. And we already know they knew before. Oliver North himself knows in 85 while doing the weapons sales to Iran and using the proceeds to the money to give to the Contras. He also knows the Contras are selling schmugs into America, trafficking schmugs into America for weapon sales too.
And he's having active having active briefings with the DEA. Okay, so for JD, can you put me in the big box before we end the live, because he's saying stop lying? If you could just put me in the big box. Okay, so just to show you guys that I'm not lying, here's the memorandum. Here's the docket number for the document. Here's the date of the briefing. And then we can go down here, the stamp of the Legislation Division Office of Congressional Affairs. And then we can go up here to CIA.gov. Okay?
See, I think this is what I was referring to when these were released publicly, I think. Like, I think it was, I want to say the last 10 years. Yeah. Yes.
But these documents have been available by the Congressional Affairs. And so what's funny about this isn't just Congressional Affairs. The Congressional Banking Affairs was also brought into this, I believe, in 96, Dan, or 94, because they had another hearing. And if you go to the CIA, you can see not just the documents, but you can see the official request for records from whatever committee was involved or asking for the records. And a lot of these records were asked by the banking committee of the Congressional Banking Committee. And there's a reason for that, right? Because what's important to understand, especially when we look at the late 80s, is, and we're going to talk about this, is because Manuel Noriega was laundering the money for America through his Panamanian banks.
Yep. And we also know that they were laundering money for Pinochet and everybody else. And
that relationship between Manuel Noriega was founded and grown by George H.W. Bush when he was head of the CIA. That's when that relationship with Manuel Noriega began. And it extended into the 80s until Manuel Noriega said, hey, you guys are making all of this money. I'm laundering this money for you. I could just do this myself and become a drug dealer myself and eliminate you guys out of the equation. And that was the reason why, like, it wasn't all of the shifty stuff that Manuel Noriega was doing. It was the fact that he dared to say to America, I'm not going to do this for you guys anymore, and I'm going to just make the money myself. And that's what eventually got Manuel Noriega in trouble.
Yep. And we'll pick up with part 2. We're going to look at the history of Iran and Nicaragua before, kind of set up the stage beforehand as well. We kind of did this background just to set up like what was the smart policy. Go ahead, CJ.
I was going to say, I hope you didn't go too much into the next part. You know,
no. This is just the lead ahead. So we're just showing you like that in the 80s they knew about this, and part of the reason why the financial industry gets investigated too in 96 is because of Gary Webb's book, which we kind of introduced at the beginning as an overview, and because in the 1986 drug abuse bill, they gave the DEA ability to prosecute some banking crimes. So it's actually expanded a lot of the banking and fraud crimes in the mid 80s, which is going to be part of the savings and loan crisis as well. So these things are interconnected in some ways, but it's mostly through legislation and not through direct contact. But where we do have direct contact is between the links to the CIA that had already been established, the Contras fighting in the Sandinistas in the late 70s, early 80s, that's going to go to the 90s, and that the CIA had already established links with other South American dictatorships and regimes since the 60s and the 50s and the 70s. There have been long-standing links with many dictatorships. So these are not new pathways. These are more evolutions of the pathways that's already brought up. All right, Panda, I think we're going to end it there. You want to go again tomorrow?
Yeah. Thanks for having me too. Yeah.
Good subject. Oh, go ahead, Panda. I think you have to do your mic thing again.
So I think, Dan's going to be covering that part, and I'm going to be more going into, I don't want to give away the name, so I'll wait till tomorrow. But what's important is the reason how Webb got a hold of this story is, I'll just make it very quick and brief. I won't go into details. He was covering another story that had him having to go to a courtroom. And if you were here for me to read the introduction, Maxine Waters lists the name of the family that this man came from. And in the courtroom, lo and behold, in pops this well-known drug cartel leader, and and that's where Webb was like, "What the f is going on?" Once he realizes that this man is an informant, and then realizes that he's connected to Ricky Ross. I'm gonna kind of cover that part, and then Dan's gonna cover the other part. But we're gonna do a raid into Janae's live. I was wondering, like, how can I? Do you have her at name?
I do. Give me one sec.
Yeah. Can we add that? So I want you guys to go ahead and go into Janae's live, and we're going to do a Dan historian raid and go into her live and show support for her fundraiser.
Yeah, she's not up
yet. Okay.
Yeah.
She will be soon, though. She starts at 5 usually and goes till 8. So Dan's going to put the name up for you guys. And then that way you can at least go and follow her and turn on your notifications for her lives. And then you can go to her live.
Let me see. It's YouTube. There we go. Hood Storyteller. That damn Janae.
Yes, that's what it is. That damn Janae.
That damn Janae. I mean, honestly, TBH, that's like, that's a pretty good one. I can't beat that. That's got alliteration. That's got everything. So yeah, let me put a text box up here.
There we go.
For us.
So we're gonna do same time, same bat channel tomorrow, or do you need to do a different time, Dan?
I mean, I'll let you know. I don't know if 3:30 works for you. We might do earlier, honestly.
Anytime works for me tomorrow. So you just let me know. I'm just wanting to so much for the audience, so they know about what time.
They'll get used to it. We're all on the internet nowadays. They'll log in if it's 2 in the morning or 2 at night. Like, it doesn't matter which way, shape, or form.
Look at this white man being dismissive of the organization of a Black woman. So typical.
It's not. Listen, it's for the audience, not for you. Hey, Jamco, good to see you again.
So I'm glad that you guys are enjoying the lives. If you guys want to send us some DMs and give us some feedbacks. And also, if there's something that you want us to cover at any point, like a conspiracy theory or any piece of history that you guys are interested in, please send either myself or Dan a DM. Let us know. And we'd be more than happy to look into it, do the research, and try to come up with it in our programming. This is very new. So any feedback is accepted, and share this to your friends and family so they can join and have fun learning history, because history is sexy, contrary to what MAGA out here has you guys thinking. Look at Dan. Look at that fine specimen.
My wife watches this, by the way, so she's also and Panda's her favorite, by the way. So if anybody's watching this, be like, "Isn't Dan married?" It's like this is accepted gassing up right now. This is mutually ethical gassing up at the moment. And we love Janae's up. Everyone go to Janae at Dan Janae.
Janae Rage, you guys.
Go raid.
See you guys tomorrow. Dan, thank you so much. This was great. I think this is going to be so